So the principle of subsidiarity is a fundamental principle, which means you should allow local communities take responsibility for the most important decisions that have to be taken in
similar to what Trump is doing with the states.
In a particular state, like in Texas, you allow Texans to take decisions which concern them most, right? When you talk about, educational system, when you talk about, taxes, they have that freedom. Now, increasingly, Brussels wants to build the United States of Europe. But the problem is, you don't have a nation called the European nation. You have many nations, right? Unlike in America, where you have one nation under God, which is the Americans, in Europe, you have lots of nations, 27 nations, and they have their own history, they have their own particularities when it comes to culture, religion, mores, and other things. And Brussels is just ignorant of that, just doesn't want to listen to those voices which still try to bring a specific color to a local culture. So what we need to do is to go back to the principle of subsidiarity, which was the principle used by the founding fathers of the EU in the 50s, right? In the 50s, they never thought, like Robert Schuman and Konrad Adenauer and these great, these great gentlemen and these giants of Christian democracy, they were not thinking about building an empire at all. They were just trying to build peace, right? And they did. For like 70 years, we had peace in Europe, with one big exception, which was the war in Yugoslavia. And that was in 1999, and we saw some bombs dropping on Belgrade. Wasn't really pleasant. And of course, we saw the atrocities also in Srebrenica, which had to be condemned too. But again, apart from that war in Yugoslavia, we had a long-lasting peace, right, in Europe. And to some extent, we can say the EU project, if we talk about peace, was a successful project. But if you talk about not just peace, but also about freedom, would you call it a successful project when you see so many intellectuals, when you see so many politicians, so many influencers being censored by Facebook or YouTube or other such platforms under the pressure coming from the Commission? Because the Commission, the European Commission, wants to have special policies to combat misinformation. And this is what J.D. Vance said, right? And that actually ends up being a censorship tool. And if your voice is being silenced, then my question to you, Mario, is where is your dignity? If I just cancel right now your mic, I talk and you can't talk, is that equality? Is that, like, do I grant you dignity? No. And that's what we feel. Like, under the COVID crisis, we had so many questions to ask about the therapy, about, which medicine we should take. Should we use ivermectin or not? Trump would say yes, right? Those questions were banned. We couldn't even have a conversation. Now, modernity as a project, right? The modern world started with a promise. And modernity says we should allow a plurality of opinions, right? That's the essence of modernity. Unlike, say, in the medieval times, there's just one opinion accepted. In the modern world, we were told we should have many opinions. And the essence of progress, especially in the field of science, requires these ideas, these paradigms, these schools of thought engaging in a polemical but also creative conversation, which would, of course, bring out like unexpected results. And this is the beauty of the history of the modern world. We see unexpected results from creative conversations between different schools of thought. But such schools of thought are not allowed anymore. You have to have just one understanding of medicine, one understanding of science, one understanding of, say, vaccines, and so on and so forth.
So how can you have those schools of thoughts with a commissioner or with a commission like what's happening in Brussels? Is that even possible with the current system?
I don't think so. We have to structurally, basically change the EU and especially the European Commission by claiming back our right to veto, I would say, to veto some laws. For instance, like today in Romania, whether you like it or not, some propositions that come from Brussels are mandatory, and that's why Brexit took place. I'm not so extreme in terms of like supporting or endorsing an exit from the European Union. No, I wouldn't say that. Certainly we should try to keep that common market for all of us, because it's good to trade, it's good to create a common market for goods and objects and for people. But at the same time, I would say the right to veto some propositions coming from Brussels should be something we should claim back for ourselves.
Okay, and I think Romania is facing an even bigger crisis. Can you tell me more about the day your election was cancelled in December? What was the first thing that came to mind when you saw that happen?
I couldn't believe my eyes, you know, I couldn't really accept that 35 years after the collapse of communism, this building was built by a dictator. I mean, I told you just before we started the interview that young men, soldiers of your age, 18, 19, 20, 25, they were killed. They were literally dying here. They couldn't actually say yes or no to the dictator. They were just asked to build this building, just like St. Petersburg under Peter the Great, and some of them died. So we knew what dictatorship looked like, okay? It was a space in which freedom of conscience didn't exist. So the most fundamental expression of human dignity is freedom, right? Is the right to speak up against the dictator or the tyrant who is abusing you. Now, the Romanians wanted to have basically their voice heard by the politicians, so they all went twice to vote for their president. That's our system. We have a large diaspora, which is still voting, outre-mer, as the French put it, people who actually have Romanian citizenship, but they spend their time in, say, England or in Ireland or in France. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of the blue, we just read basically a declaration from the Constitutional Court suggesting that the elections should be cancelled for whatever reasons.